So welcome, Calico. I'm so delighted you're here with us. I think you
It's
know
my
everybody.
joy.
Oh, good. I think you know a lot of people on the call, but I'd like you to just maybe start by introducing yourself. Tell us about the Calico character that's behind the character.
Really, well, Calico, as I have known her to be, is no longer. That's all I can really say. Who I am today is the result of training my mind to see everything differently, absolutely everything differently. I mean, just a little history to when mind training really took hold. I've studied the course for, I don't know, 30 years or something like that. Been in a lot of book studies, started a lot of book studies. I mean, I've done all that. I don't really do any of that anymore because the whole focus for me is, and again, you know, the course says our only function is to forgive. And it was 2009, I was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic cancer starting in my vagina, my uterus, and there was nothing they could do about it. They basically said, you know, there's not a lot we can do for you. And so about 2 years later, I went into hospice. And that's where I really started to get, I'm missing something. I'm missing a key part of what A Course in Miracles is talking about. And time was running out. And so it was kind of like the critical factor was, am I going to have time to even do this? And, you know, I kept hearing, jump, take your bed and walk, you know, move. This is not the time for you to go. And I joined the community, and that's where I met Laverne. And, you know, I just love to say the first day I walked into her room, because she had introduced me to the instrument for peace, and I was using it all the time. And it was handwritten out. I mean, there were like, I think 4 pages or something we had to write for every forgiveness opportunity. And I was going into Laverne a lot going, I don't get it. What is this asking of me? I don't understand. And Laverne was extremely patient with me. But one of the things I noticed was on her wall, she had one huge white wall, and it was just covered with little sticky notes, covered. And it was the beginnings of the app, the Spiri app that she was working on. And all I kept knowing, and it was a knowing way beyond any kind of understanding, it was, this woman's onto something. And what it was really, it's time to put the book down. It's time to stop the book studies. It's time to put this into action. And I remember having so much confusion while I was in hospice thinking, but I don't know how to do that. I don't even know where to begin. And when I joined this community, and that was a huge ordeal, I was in hospice. I was on a ventilator for 24/7. I mean, I thought, I don't even know how I'm going to do this, but in my heart, I knew it was my path. It was where I needed to go. So I joined this community. I met Laverne and started using the instrument for peace, which completely transformed my life. And all I can say is BBOT is the current
Next generation.
That's the word I wanted. It's the next generation of all the predecessors that have gone before it. And it's even simplified in my mind now, because I don't really need BBOT because it's such an automatic process for me. I just like to say, you know, with Laverne moving to the beach, I had some feelings come up about it. You know, it was like there was loss. She was leaving me. And I didn't even tell Laverne this until after she came back and said she wasn't moving. And I just said, I went through this whole healing process with it of, I can't be left. I'm the Christ. That's all there is. And this came as a result of having my mind so focused on forgiveness. Anything that I'm upset about out there is my lesson, no one else's lesson. Doesn't matter who's involved with it, no matter what it looks like, it's our lesson to get. And the lesson for me was, I can do this without Laverne. I can do this without anybody. And the reality is, that's fabulous. I don't need anybody. And I love everybody, which is a juxtaposition that I couldn't have understood 12 years ago. But it's like, I kept with it because I knew there was something that it spoke to in me, in the truth of who I am, in the truth of who we all are. We're the Christ. And it's ours to join with that Christ mind, seeing absolutely everything differently through love. And, in the beginning, it may seem daunting, and it did for me. I'd be working on one little upset on the instrument for peace, and I kept a sheet of paper right next to it, because as I'm going through the instrument of peace on this one little issue, 25 other complaints would come up. And I would just write them all down just to get them out of my head onto paper and focus on this one little issue. And I think at my peak usage at that time, I did 25 instruments for peace in one day. And it was a big day. And I had probably 50 or 100 other complaints that fell out of these 25 complaints. But it's like, my commitment was complete. And, I thank God for stage 4 cancer that they couldn't do anything for, because it kept my focus very laser. I mean, I didn't waver. Everything was mine to clear through my mind. And, we live in this dream of death, as the Course calls it. It's a dream of death. And, I actually, Apple sends me every morning, the highlights of the news. And I read through them just to see if anything hooks me. Am I still believing in any of this? And I know that there have been some recent shootings in the US, and a lot of people are upset about them. And I've been reading about the Ukraine and, all of these really, horrible things that seem to be happening in the world. I have no control over any of that. All I have control over is how I see them. And that's my clearing always. So if I get upset by something in the news, this is where we go to Bebot with it. What is the belief that people are suffering? Well, guess what? People suffer. They do. Do I have any ability to help them? No. The only one that's really suffering is me, thinking that there are people suffering in the world. And that I do have complete control over. And so it's kind of like really lasering in on this function called forgiveness. And it's my top priority. Nothing else means anything. And I live in a spiritual community now with lots of people moving in and out and in and out. And I've wanted to move several times. And each time that desire to move comes up, I have to really sit with, what am I running from? What is it that I don't want to face? And the reality is, there's so many personalities, and sometimes they trigger me. And that's the gift of living in a spiritual community. I work on them because it's not about them. It's about me and how I see them and how they're triggering me. What's being triggered? Some belief. I had a and the beliefs run the gamut. They're not just bad things. I mean, I have the dryer right outside my window. And I had, this ongoing struggle with the dryer of people coming in at 10 o'clock at night and turning it on and drying their clothes. And in my mind, I'd go, well, that's not a very kind thing for people to do. Well, kindness is a belief. I have a belief about kindness. I know what kindness looks like. And operating a dryer outside of someone's window at 10 o'clock is not kind. But I had to completely turn that around. And Bebop was very helpful for that with me. It was this belief in kindness needs to look a certain way. And the reality is, nothing needs to be the way I want it. And as I let go of all those desires to see it my way, which, I mean, the Calico, who I've been most of my life, has been a very angry, judgmental person. They're not being kind. That's not right. Oh, that's totally wrong. Oh, we shouldn't be having wars. We need to do something about that. Perhaps dealing with a different political party would be more effective. It's like, no, none of that is it. It's this internal dialogue with God. And the Course talks about the horizontal and the vertical. The vertical is where all wars, death, destruction, pain, and suffering lives. The vertical is this laser moment of now, that if we desire it, we can access it right here, right now. And, I was thinking this afternoon, and this is what the tool of Bebop is so effective at doing. And a lot of people don't understand how to use it. And all I can say is, if there's feelings coming up other than joy and happiness in the moment, that's your time to deal with it. You don't have to dig this stuff up. In fact, don't dig anything up. It will just keep this process ongoing, this dream of death. This is where traditional therapy runs amok, totally. Let's talk about that rape. Let's talk about this, abusive husband. Let's talk. It's like, no, we don't need to dig it up. If it's in the moment and there's someone in your field of vision in the moment that's triggering something that reminds you, I mean, one of the things I dealt with in community a lot was I hated angry men. Didn't like them, didn't want anything to do with them. I mean, it was one giant push away. I'm not going to deal with them. I don't need to deal with them. It's not my thing. They're angry. I'm not. Well, the reality was I had more rage in me than anyone I ever saw in community. But it was a process to get there. Every time some angry man would trigger me, it was my gift to go get quiet and at the time do an instrument or a spiri and to just see what it was I was believing in this whole thing of angry men. And there was a lot. I had a raging father, there were gang rapes, there's a lot of history that this touched on. But the reality was the only way I could access the clearing of forgiveness was in the moment of now, when I would see an angry man and it would trigger something in me. And the trigger was always, get away from them, just leave, get away from them. And that was kind of my MO throughout life. I left. Whatever didn't work for me, I just left. I had no hesitation with it. It's like, oh no, that is so not helpful. I'm getting away from it. Well, the reality was it was really staying put and having a tool that I could go through and see what the upset was, what I wanted to have happen instead. And for me, it was, well, I didn't want to be around angry men. And then the question is, after you write what you wanted to have happen, is the question is always, Are you willing to give up what you wanted to happen in order to have the peace of God? Critical. And Laverne can tell you, this question stopped me more than once. It's like, well, no, I'm not wanting to give that up. I'm happier when I I don't have to deal with this stuff. Why would I want to deal with it? And it was like, I had such a right wrong mind. I was hyper vigilant to seeing right and wrong, good and bad. And so it was until I could hold myself still enough, join with God in this process called forgiveness, and ask, Holy Spirit, help me see this differently, that what would come through for me would be all of these memories that would come forth in a very unpainful way, I might say, of just how I had built this whole belief system up of why I didn't like angry men. And it was like, oh, well, that makes sense. But in this moment of now, is any of that happening? No, none of it's happening. It's just my mind. I'm thinking these thoughts that are taking me back into a past moment where I suffered. And so it's holding this firm moment of now. And I like Eckhart Tolle made a lot of money on this book, Power of Now. And it really is the only place we can ever address forgiveness is now. There is no future forgiveness work. There is no past forgiveness work. There's only present forgiveness work. And and for me, I don't even know how long it's been since I joined the community where Laverne and I were living at the time. But the speed up was profound. It was profound because everything became about my mind training and everything was my projection. So, and I know a lot of people are upset about Ukraine or upset about these shootings. And I just say, it doesn't have anything to do with them.
Well, I was just thinking as you're talking about that, Calico, if you could share the parable of the chopping onion story, because I feel like that's so profound when we talk about wars or we talk about shootings, but let's talk about you having
chopping onions.
Chopping onions.
And this is a perfect parable of, so my war at one time in Living Miracles, we all had tasks to do. And I must say, I was a physician in my previous incarnation, so for 35 years, I was a doctor of chiropractic. And so when I got to the community, one of my tasks was to help in the kitchen. And one of the big tasks in the kitchen was chopping onions. So you may be upset about the shootings or the Ukraine, but at that moment in time, I was upset about chopping onions. That was my nemesis during the course of my day, was to chop onions endlessly. It felt like it was endless chopping onions. And I'd have all these beliefs going through my mind. Don't they know who I am? And this is so beneath me. And I have so much more to give than chopping onions. And, and the list went on and on and on. And there was one moment, and I can still see the knife going through the damn onion when I say this. The knife is going through the onion, and I thought, it's not the onion. It's what I think about the onion. And that's set on all these beliefs that were in place of, but I'm important. I have something to say. Chopping onions is beneath me. It was all these beliefs that were in place. So I couldn't even be present to the moment of now of just chopping an onion. And it's the same way the mind works on anything. If there's an upset in the moment, I don't care what it is, a dryer, an onion, a husband, a child, a friend, doesn't matter. in the moment, if there's an upset, just pause, write about it, start writing about it.
Bebop.
Do a bebot on it, get clear. Well, my husband came and said he's leaving me, whatever, and just get into it, get into the whole expression of it. And then at some point, Bebop will say, well, what did you want to have happen instead? Now, for me, when I was chopping onions before I had my instantaneous awakening, it was like, well, I don't want to be chopping onions. I'd rather be doing anything but chopping onions. And it's like, and then Bebop will ask you, well, are you willing to give up this idea of what you wanted to have happen? If you give up the idea that you will do anything but be chopping onions for the rest of your life, are you willing to give that up for the peace of God? I was godsmacked, totally. It was like, oh my God, it's an inside job completely. And it completely transformed it. And, and this doesn't, it doesn't necessarily mean that anything in the script is going to change. But what I know for myself, those issues that bothered me, if I get the clearing that forgiveness allows, and it does clear it completely, whatever that issue is disappears. Quite soon after having the instant awareness of chopping onions, I didn't have to chop them anymore. The dryer, no one's used the dryer after 6 o'clock since, but it was my lesson, because again, Bebop will tell you at some point, it's a tool to help you get through everything, and your life will be so joyous and happy and complete. And nothing can prevent you. God will not interfere with lessons we must learn.
So let me ask you this, because I feel like this is a good, if anyone heard you give your introduction and say, cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me, they'd be saying, what are you talking about? And why are you now talking about onions and dryers? That doesn't seem like there's a connection.
They're the same thing. There's no priority of upsets. The upset is upset, period. Doesn't matter what's causing it. It's all an upset. And that's where Bebop really simplifies this process, because it takes whatever is going on in the moment, turns it around in the same way, and allows you to see it differently. And once you see it differently, it's no upset. And I must say, and I say a lot of bigger upsets, and yeah, the cancer there were some big upsets with cancer. It had a lot of legs, okay? So, it's like I'd chop off one leg, go, whoa, handled that. And then another leg would appear, so there were a lot of beliefs that went into you're dying from cancer. There were a lot of legs. It didn't just happen in one fell swoop. I had to keep at it. And chopping onions was one leg of becoming peaceful with cancer. It makes no sense, perhaps, to anyone hearing this, but it makes sense to me, because it was me pulling back my projection. And that's all it is. Even me pulling back my projection of having stage 4 cancer. And I can't say that I'm healed with cancer, because I still have I have a belief that I have a tumor inside this body. And that's okay. If it needs to stay around for however it needs to stay around, it keeps me going deeper and deeper. And it's, there is no crucifixion of myself unless I'm doing it. And cancer is a beautiful example of that. I was crucifying myself, and I could do a 5-month course on this, but the reality was, I grew up in an environment where I I was incapable of loving myself. You know, no matter how much money I got, no matter how much prestige I got, no matter how many titles I received, I still didn't like me. I didn't like me. And it's like this forgiveness process, I think, by taking on these individual beliefs. And this is why I got cancer. I really feel like in the first place was I felt so unworthy that I was projecting cancer on myself. Not only just cancer, stage 4 metastatic, we can't help you cancer. And it's kind of like, that's how much I didn't like myself. And it's like when I started loving myself and through this process of taking each individual upset one at a time, including chopping onions, I'm learning how to love myself for the first time ever. And I mean, I still go through it. I mean, the form I'm in now is not the same form I was 20 years ago. It moves slowly. And I sometimes judge it for moving slowly. And then I go immediately into my mind training. It's like, would you be willing to just give up this idea that you have to move any faster than what you are in order to have the peace of God? You know, everything gets filtered through this same thing. And, you know, right now, again, I'm not needing Bebot, and it's a good thing since I've been locked out of Facebook and Messenger, but it's kind of like this tool is automatic in me. And, you know, there was a topic in one book study once of what do you bring to the party of awakening or something like that. And, you know, people were saying, oh, I do music, I do art, I sing, I dance, I do this, I do that. And I thought, no, I'd have none of those things. And I sat with this for a few days thinking, what do I bring to the party? And what I bring to the party is my willingness and determination to pull back every projection I put out there.
Amen.
Amen. Because that's what's killing us. That's what's creating our suffering. And if we can just start tuning in to our judgments in this moment, and believe me, there are a lot of them. Oh my God. You know, the chopping onions, you know, where I hated chopping onions, it would spread to, okay, who told me to chop those onions? They're on my shit list. I hate them. They're dead to me. You know, I mean, it would just, these beliefs build huge. It's like a ball of string that's knotted up. And as
I just wanted to just say about that, Calico, because, you know, and I feel that both you and I have had a lot of similar experiences with the mind tools, that when the mind is really in upset mode, so angry or so sad or frustrated, the last thing it can do is sort things out.
Yeah.
You know, it takes a high degree of mind training. And I had used the mind tools for 7-8 years consistently. And then now I can actually do it in my mind, but it's taken a lot of practice, and it's taken I don't feel that there are any coincidences, and there's no coincidence that she can't get into the Bebot. You know, it's like she doesn't need the tool. She doesn't need the tool because she's doing it automatically, but it's taken all of the practice. It's like, you know, Jiminy Cricket on Pinocchio's shoulder. You know, Jiminy was there when Pinocchio needed Jiminy, but at some point, you know, Jiminy Cricket didn't need to be there. Yeah. You know, he could actually do it himself. He could be, you know, he could be the boy on the strings himself, you know, with God on the strings with God himself. And so I feel, yeah, I just feel that this is an important part of this. Like, we use these tools as long as we need them, and know that even along the path, if something really difficult comes up, you know, the tools are there. We use the tools, because the mind is the ring of fear is underneath the perceptions and the emotions in the mind. So being aware that the ego does not want you to get down to the thought and belief level. We just have to know that's the ego's game. And so when we feel that intensity, it's like, okay, I'm going to go use a mind tool because the
Yes.
ego's, there's something the ego does not want me to look at, you know?
And that's critical. Absolutely. And, and just to follow up on that, I mean, I must say, I still miss being on Bebot, because one of the things I used in Bebot that I really loved was the daily reminder. And it would ding, I had it set at 5 or 6 times a day. It would just ding to remind me, do you remember what you set up for today? And I loved having that reminder, that moment, that pause of, oh, God's calling. Let's just pause a moment here and be with God and remember what we set our day up for, which brings me to another little loop off of that thought. I'm going to have Laverne put her PayPal account in. And if any of you have any resources that you'd love to share, my, oh God, there's so much going on with Bebot, but one of the things that I would love to see is an app that people could download to their phones that's not messenger related. That's just an app that you put on your phone. And it, Laverne and I have talked, we have so many plans on extending this app to the point that you can watch movies with commentary, on the app. And so if you have extra resources that you'd like to share, I've been locked out of my PayPal account too, but Laverne has one. And so we're just, if you have some extra pennies that you'd like to share, send them to Laverne, because we are collecting money to get an app put together so that we can have a freestanding Bebot that's not dependent on the rules and regs of Facebook and Messenger, because I want it.
I do have to say, we've already looked into the app idea, because the main complaint about Bebot is if you don't check in every day, it stops checking in with you. And then people are like, how come Bebot stopped checking in with me? And this is a rule that's on Messenger, that if we had Bebot in an app, then it would just remind you every day, wouldn't stop until you said, stop reminding me, but it wouldn't stop. And that's like one of the key things for having an app. But to really do a good app, it's going to run us $50,000 on the low end. So it's almost like we need to find some person or persons that are really able to put a good chunk of money in to help us build this app so that it's not on the Messenger platform. Because we were just talking before everybody came onto this call about we're so activated by this. And there's a guy in the community, his name is Andy Page. He's a young guy, and he joined the Living Miracles community because he was so activated with games and virtual reality.
He was like 20 years old.
And now he's what, 24, 25, something, not old. He's very young, but he just came in and he says, I don't know. I just feel that, the Holy Spirit wants us to use these platforms, these new platforms for waking up. And both Calico and I, when we heard that, I mean, the three of us, Andy and Calico and I, when we get together, we just get so lit up with these ideas. Like, what is it that the Holy Spirit wants to bring in with this new technology? Yeah. And can you imagine the possibilities? And we had a call yesterday, and he was on the call, and he was sharing about, he had just watched this movie about Yogananda. It's called Awakening. But if you haven't seen the movie, see it, because it's so interesting, the story of this man. And he was a guru or mystic in the 1920s, 1930s. He from India, he moved to the United States to spread this message of awakening. And he had this idea of sending out like mass mailings to people, to get them to come to his events. And thousands of people showed up. I mean, that was really innovative. An innovative way of reaching people. And this is the same possibilities that are available to us with this, the technologies of Messenger, technologies of the app, and incorporating those elements into VR, it's exciting. And it's, it's like open to anybody that really has the desire to awaken. It isn't limited to Course in Miracles people, because a lot of times young people don't have, sort of the religious filters that older people who maybe grew up in homes where there was a lot of religion, they're not having to break through those limitations.
Right. And again, it goes back to what's available by doing this tool. And, all I can say is take it one moment at a time. That's the only reason we're here in time anyway, is to give every projection a little bit of time with God to see it differently. Because once you start clearing this stuff out, all I can say is I live in a world of joy most of the time, unless Laverne says she's moving to the beach, and then I'm like activated. But it's kind of like, for the most part, and even that, I moved through it very quickly, and I was like, go to the beach, we'll Skype. It's just kind of like, I really don't need anything in my life right now. I have all my needs taken care of. And the greatest gift of all right now in this moment is I live the peace of God ongoingly. And it brings me joy for no apparent reason. And it's kind of like having the greatest inside gift I have ever received. And I just want to extend that. And for me, Bebot is the way, because it was a tool that worked very effectively. Is it the only way? Absolutely not. But, because I was kind of faced with time issues, this was the fastest way I have ever seen. Again, I had 25, 30 years of book study, reading, and it didn't get me anywhere. Doing the mind training moved quickly, because then it was the application of what Jesus is talking about in the Course in Miracles. Jesus didn't wake up one morning and he could have people pounding, nails into his hands, and he's going, "I'll forgive them. They know not what they're doing." He had to do a little bit of forgiveness work to get up to that point. And it's kind of like, and that's what we're all being asked. This is the next generation of A Course in Miracles, is to really live this, not just read it and study it, to really activate our minds. And I say, oh my God, see every projection and grievance as a gift, because this is the happy learner. Because the more grievances you have, the more clearing that can happen. And the more clearing that happens, your mind just gets lighter and lighter and lighter, and happier and happier and happier. And it's kind of like, I didn't think this was possible. I was dying a very angry woman. I don't even know who she was, because who I am now is not her. I'm somebody else. I don't know who I am.
And I have to just say about that, because the process of this, we have been through this, that oftentimes when we're going through it, it's like we feel terrible. And it's like, or even being around happy people. I can remember and I remember you, Calico, when you were around sometime, and you guys just grate on my nerves, you grate on my nerves, but I'm hanging in there with you, because I know this is the direction for me. But it's like, even thinking in the mind, like, whose nerves are getting grated on? Who's kicking and screaming in this process, is the ego, and until we can pull away from the ego's feelings, we identify with those. It feels like us, feels like us going through a death, feels like us going through the grinder, and Calico will say that there was a post of a Thanksgiving picture, and I said, "Oh, Calico, I saw your picture. You were in this picture of the Thanksgiving living at the La Casa de los Milagros." And she said, "Yeah, I was really going through hell that day."
I was so angry that day.
There was an angry man sitting next to you, or the one person that you thought was an angry man sitting next to you. I thought, oh, she looks like she's having fun.
And that's how you know you've hit on a really good judgment, is when you know you're right. and you're just and it's like, hang in there, hold that thought, ask to see it differently, because yeah, we all go through it. It's like, oh, this is so not right to be feeling like this. And it's like, just beyond that, just in a breath beyond that, is this peace. And the upset disappears completely. The grievance disappears completely. I mean, it's funny, I can remember the picture, but I don't remember what the grievance was. But I remember I was so angry that day. And it's kind of like, and that's all that mattered. It was like I was going through the process, and it was perfect. And it happened to be on a Thanksgiving when they took a picture and asked us all to smile. And I'm thinking, yeah, here.
What I love about Calico's story too, and what I've noticed, about you, you hardly talk about the cancer. And I heard you say you still have the cancer or some tumor in the body, but she never focuses on that. She's either in the joy or she's clearing something that is in the way of being in the joy. And it's usually something like cutting onions, or the sound of a dryer while she's trying to sleep, or, somebody loud that's really loud, that talks loud, next door, because she's in that environment where there's a lot of kind of things that can poke at you. So she's working with the specifics of those things around her, and not the whatever's happening with the body is just going to happen with the body. It's not like there's a control over it, so it's like, we don't want to focus on the things that we can't control. We want to focus on the things we can control, which is our thoughts and beliefs. That's really the only place that we have control, is how we're thinking and believing and feeling about things.
And just to say a little bit more about that, for anyone that's feeling any physical stuff going on, or, beliefs that they have, it's not that I don't deal with them. The body is always changing, always, and it will continue. It will change all the time. It'll go from fat to thin, thin to fat, and old, young to old, and whatever, good days, good hair days, bad hair days. It's always changing. And all I know is different things come up in my body, and I'm immediately, I get quiet with God and ask to see it differently. And usually what pops in when I'm having some kind of physical whatever going on is a grievance. It's like, well, no, this guy doing his laundry at night's making me crazy. It's like, oh, okay, I'll deal with that. And as soon as I deal with that, then the dryer doesn't bother me, the symptoms disappear or change, or I'm just not bothered by them anymore. And it's taken the focus off the frame of body, because the body's just a communication device. That's really all it is. And they all look different and they all act different. The one thing I know is we have to love them exactly as they are, period, no exceptions. And, again, there was nothing about this body I loved. And so there were a lot of judgments in my projected world that I had to clear before I came to the terms of, wow, I really don't mind any of this. It wasn't even that I was focusing on something that I wanted to learn to love. It was like, as I was clearing all these little projections, grievances, the body all of a sudden became okay. And then it became more than okay. It became, wow, I am so grateful to have this form still.
I love that story, of Ramana Maharshi. He had a tumor, and I think the people around him were so concerned and, wanted to get him to the doctor and get him somewhere where he could get help. And he's basically saying, is there someone that had a question for me? You know, he's just wanting to really connect with people in the mind. He's not thinking about the body, you know, it's just that same thing. It's just solely as a communication device. And
Right.
David was talking the other day on one of the movie gatherings, is like, you know, just holding up a pencil. This body is just like this pencil. There's no difference. Oh, and here's a marker. That's another body. There's no difference between this pencil and this marker, you know?
Well, you know, and I remember one of my favorite videos of the Dalai Lama. He was, I don't know where he was, but he was taking questions. And this one gentleman got on, it was back when China was taking over Tibet, and he was upset about it. He was going on and on and on. Well, how can you need to do something. What can you do? And how do, you know, what can we do? Where do we send money? And he was very, very animated and upset. And the Dalai Lama just listened. And all of a sudden he started laughing. He just started laughing. And in the way that only that the Dalai Lama can do, he was just hilarious. He was beside himself with laughter. And it was like, the guy was just like, what the hell? And it's like, and that's what happens when you clear your mind. It's like stuff happens, but somehow, unless there's something I can do, you know, if someone dies in front of me, I'm not going to just not call 911, you know, I mean, but the reality is a lot of the things that we see on news and all this, we have no control over whatsoever. So why spend an ounce of time focusing on it except to clear our minds and see it differently and to see where we are holding grievances. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have a few minutes, and I'd just like to open it up to see if anyone has any questions or comments about anything that we've been talking about this hour. You probably have to unmute yourself too to do that. Mary, let me get you. Okay, got it. Whoops. Okay, there you go.
You said you'd have to unmute yourself, and then you unmuted me. So
No.
we were crossing paths there.
Yeah.
Wow, Calico. Wow. It's just so beautiful to be here with you. And it's like, I just feel the blessing of it's like I'm seeing myself in the mirror because of my mind, because everything you've talked about it's just resonates. It's just, I'm also living in a community now. I also hated chopping onions. I thought it was beneath me when I was at Living Miracles. I also had to take pictures when I was like, what the fuck? I hate it here, you know? And so, but it was still a valuable experience. And I've learned, I'm looking at you guys. I'm like, look, I'm still connected. And it's just so beautiful. It's like, we're always connected. Okay. So also I have always had a problem with angry men. And yeah, as a matter of fact, I have one in particular that's here in this community, Joe. And I was like, if we're doing levels of mine, I'm going to have to do it on Joe. Because I was so angry with him. The rage was coming out, and it was so justified. But as I've been doing the Bebot every day, and it's almost always a joyful day, I just feel like I have so much joy to give. And I love the laughter. I love, you know, that to me is so healing. And so the anger, when the anger came up, I could not even get there. I just was so angry. And what happened for me is I had to just love the anger. It's like, I just almost heard this voice that said, you need this. You need to let this out. It's been festering in there. And I just started well, it's okay. I can be angry. Thank you, Joe, for letting me be angry. Yeah. Okay. And then the next thing is, I don't want to be around Joe. And okay. It seems like the smaller self in the forgiveness, the old way of forgiveness is always saying, yeah, you got to love everyone as the Christ. You got to forgive Joe. But I absolutely know that it's not Joe I'm forgiving. And so what came to me, it was so beautiful, is after doing all my work with this, is it's time to let Joe go. And I have not gone to, there's a long story with him, but I have just let him go. I didn't go to the movie Saturday night that we had, the group movie, because it's like, I really didn't want to go anyway. It's Joe gave me, it's like, well, Joe's going to be there. Well, I don't even want to go. So I just was like, Joe is showing me how to honor myself. So anyway, what's coming up for me is when you're talking about forgiving the angry men, and of course, Joe is dropping away from, it's like daily, he's not showing up in front of me every minute now. In fact, I'm not seeing him at all, which is so interesting. But it's when you said something about, I always wanted to be away from them. It's like, but Jesus is telling me, you time to let Joe go. Does that mean run away from him? And it's not that. It's letting Joe go in my mind. So I don't think there's anything saying that just because I've had an issue with angry men, it's bringing up all this rage, that I need to continue to allow these angry men in my life. I think that's what I'm asking. This is a question.
This is great.
Forgiving the angry man, does it mean that I have to find a way to be with Joe?
That's a great question. And this goes back into something that is talked about in Bebot as well. At some point after you've done whatever forgiveness work you can do with Joe, forgiven whatever you can forgive that you're projecting in yourself, then listen to your guidance. No, I'm not wanting to go to the movie. And just because Joe's there doesn't mean that's the reason that you're not going to the movie. Now, here's what the script will throw you if you're not complete with your healing of hangry men. There'll be someone else that'll come into your life. And I had that happen to me numerous times in Living Miracles. I deal with one angry man. I go, I think I'm okay. I think I'm okay. And then another angry man, and it would take me into a deeper level of dealing with angry men. So it's kind of like, don't worry. However you deal with it is perfect. I mean, I tell people to caution pushing away too fast. But you obviously have done your work with it. You did the Bebot, and it's kind of like, then just allow yourself to be Joeless for the time being.
I love it.
And just enjoy your life. And if there's more healing to do, it will present itself. It'll show up. Yeah. God is not going to prevent us from the lessons we must learn, ever.
Yeah. And we have to just comment on that too, Mary, because once we really pull this back, that we see that everything outside of our mind is actually a reflection, 100% reflection, then you'll start seeing that Joe is your mind, that there's some push away of anger that shows up in a Joe character, and so by going through, what are the beliefs underneath that? What is it, what is the belief that comes up around angry men, and then really it always comes back to what it is that we're thinking and believing, a judgment about that man that really becomes a judgment about our own anger, our own not accepting that in ourselves, so it's like embracing the anger. But, to say that is one thing, but to really experience that as a result of forgiving Joe is that's game over for the ego. That's the whole thing. That's the whole trick.
And there all those beliefs that were hooked into this giant concept called angry men was, it's dangerous. I shouldn't have to deal with this. This is not mine. I mean, those are all just
Not
beliefs.
spiritual enough.
I'm not spiritual enough.
Yeah.
God wouldn't, this is not, God doesn't exist because this wouldn't be happening. You know, I mean, all those are beliefs that have to be dealt with. And that's all they need. And to deal with them is just to acknowledge that they're there. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah. To deal with them is just to acknowledge it and
Yeah.
to acknowledge they're there. And when you said, you know, it's like, I love that, Joe list. I was thinking of you and, you know, there's a part of you that's going, I would like to be tumorless, but in acknowledging that the tumor is there, I can still be okay.
Yeah.
Is not holding the tumor there. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know. I really don't know. And the
Yeah.
reality is, I don't care because I'm happy.
You don't care. That's yeah. That's what I want to be. Is just that. Like it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It just doesn't matter.
And then we keep working on the onions and
Yeah.
the dryers and the fly in the room.
And anything,
Exactly.
yeah,
And
the
Joe-
fly in the room. I mean, the iguana pooping on your kitchen counter. You know, I mean, it's you know, these things happen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This is
Love you, Mary.
oh.
Yeah.
Ah.
Before we go, I just want to say to everybody a few things. I'm going to try to get the link to everybody so we're all in the same room for messenger notifications. Somehow I have 3 messenger groups for notifications that I need to funnel into one. So if you get a link from me, that's so we can, and I think Tina, you're in all the groups, so you're not, you're good, but some other people are separated out into the other groups. I also had a thought for next week that just for the next 7 days, just really paying attention to any shifts in perception that you experience, you know, that is the miracle. Write it down. Would love to hear a sharing from each of you about what a miracle that you've experienced, because that's how we keep them in our awareness, is to share them. And then we also get to benefit from whatever miracles that you've had. Okay, great.
Perfect.
And thank you, Calico. It's
Oh,
so
thank you.
beautiful. I just love your spirit.